we doing the defensive end breakdown today with Sports Info Solutions. Jeff Dean has been so gracious to join us again today. We're going to dig into the most important position, according to a lot of Lions fans out there. Who are the best defensive ends in this class, and which ones could end up landing in Detroit this season? Well, we're going to talk about probably the top 10, top 12 defensive ends. We're going to go right through it, but I've got a couple of questions up front for Jeff. Kind of want to know how many starters, right? How many solid depth pieces? And is this class really as good as what some analysts are saying that it is? So without further ado, let's get right into it. Be right back here with Jeff Dean with Sports Info Solutions. Well, hello again, Jeff, man. How are you today? It is Friday, defensive end breakdown with Sports Info Solutions, your company, man. How the heck are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. So feeling a little refreshed today after going through the offensive line the other night. I guess it kind of pulled me into a different direction. Like, I didn't know what to think anymore after the breakdown. It was so good. You gave us so much information. Got a couple of really good clips out of it. And today, I'm really expecting to kind of uncover more about the defensive end group, which has been talked about like ad nauseum with every analyst out there, with Sonny Styles or Arvell Reese, or is Sonny going to be an edge? Is he going to be a linebacker? Arvell Reese, Bailey, and then who is going to be there at 17 or 50, or what is Brad Holmes going to do will be part of the conversation today. But at first, I would just like to get an opening statement, if you would. This edge class, how do you compare it to 2024? And I mean, I guess, where do you put this draft class in the hierarchy of some of the best of the most recent draft classes, in the past?
So I like this draft class very top end, just the top, 3 or 4 guys, probably better than last year. But last year had a lot more of those starters as a whole. Maybe not the kind of the top end guys that David Bailey or Arvell Reese are going to be, but there were more of those reliable 3-down guys that just didn't have that splash. But then what this draft actually has a ton of depth in are those first 2-down run stoppers or those 3rd down designated pass rushers. And that's really an interesting dynamic to have, because you're going to have teams that want them to play all 3 downs, because that's what they're hoping to get out of them. And so what you're going to get is a lot of teams that are willing to reach for a guy that they know has one of those roles and hoping to develop him. And I think we see a lot of edges go early, probably round 1 for sure. You always get those, but I expect a pretty good run on edges in that 2nd round, even if it means some teams are reaching. So as far as edge classes go these last couple of years, I would say there's a lot more excitement in this year than probably most of the recent years. I'm not sold on as many proven talents in this draft class, but when you have so many dynamic playmakers who played in huge games at college, Miami's got 2 of the top 4 edges in this class, and they, were in the national championship game. You had Ohio State and Texas Tech in the playoffs. You have a lot of excitement because they were on national television performing at a high level.
I would agree with all that. I feel, and obviously your group over there at Sports Info Solutions does an excellent job at putting all this stuff together and trying to make it easy. Not for just the people that you're contracted with, the teams that you're contracted with, but also the general public, man, just the casual fan that wants to look at an amazing site. NFLDraft.sportsinfosolutions.com is where you're going to find Sports Info Solutions. For instance, this draft matrix. So let me pop this up on the screen for everybody here. This draft matrix, we didn't really go over this a whole lot, but I put just 3 categories of player here. I got edge, defensive tackle, and linebacker. So you can kind of get that vertical alignment. But I want, if you wouldn't mind, could you just explain what the draft matrix means and why it's set up the way that it is? And again, I'm just showing the 3, but obviously there's all positions in the draft matrix.
Yeah. So this, right here is how you're viewing what an NFL team looks at on their draft night. So fans love rankings because it makes them feel like they can directly compare specific position groups, but this is truly the better way to do it. So for instance, when we're looking at that 6'6" rating, we've got a handful of edge players, we got a couple of defensive tackles, and we got 1 linebacker. Now, for somebody that's looking at this, they don't actually rank those guys like head to head. Like teams aren't looking at Cashius Howell, Caleb Banks, and trying to rank them head to head. They have them in this role they think they're going to be in, basically the same impact on a team. Now, they may come down to it, if those are the two guys they have left, look at that and be like, hey, we like this guy's medical history. We think he's got a better fit on our team. We like his third down ability, which is what we're more looking for right now. And they might make decisions like that. But they're kind of looking at this across a whole level and looking at that. So again, 5'9" is a great position for that too. You have a lot of players in that position. And again, teams will rank those in those categories, right? So they'll be ranking the edge players kind of in that category and the defensive tackles, but there's not a big difference. And there'll be opinions that come up with it. So especially if the guy in charge likes one player more than the rest of them, he can overrule an entire room. There has been quite a few instances where that's happened. So this is, in my opinion, the best way for fans to kind of see what the NFL teams are evaluating players looking like and how they can kind of take in a lot of information at once without it being overwhelming, which I think can be a problem around the draft time.
So a lot of Lions fans, I'm sure, are in or will be in at some point today or watch this live later. But what he's referring to when you hear Brad Holmes at the podium, he says it a couple of times a season, especially around this time, whenever we get to see him after the draft, and then his last performance a few weeks ago was looking at players vertically and horizontally, and that's exactly what Brad Holmes is speaking to. When you're looking at a board like this, you're looking at how these players rank as an edge position vertically and then horizontally against the rest of the board, and how you have each position stacked. And so, for instance, I'll just throw this out there. It's not going to be accurate, but you're in the first round. You're at pick 10 or pick 17. You're the Lions. Let's say that Rueben Bain's on the board and McDonald's on the board and Allen is on the board. And then maybe, well, we'll just leave it at that. So if on Brad's board, he has Bain ahead of McDonald and McDonald is lateral to Allen, how do you think he would make a move there? Would you then go to needs-based analysis, or are you still picking BPA? You're taking Bain Jr. just because he's ranked ahead of McDonald and McDonald's lateral to Allen. How do you think that choice would get made?
If this is Brad's board, that's what he's going to take Bain in a situation like this. I believe I'm always a best player available guy, and most people in those decisions are. But there will be all these players for us or for an NFL level, and the Lions will eliminate a handful of these players. We don't know exactly which ones, but a handful of these players for poor scheme fit. Maybe they didn't like their character. Maybe they have injury histories. We have quite a few of those too. Mesidor is one of those. We'll talk about him a little later. And they might just totally take them off the board, not because they don't think they have value, but because they're just not a player that they want to take in those positions. But if those are the three players available there, I think he would take Bain. I think you build championship level teams by taking the best player available. I think you build maybe playoff teams by going after need. But I think in order to get to that championship level, you have to find those impact players. Trust your board. Your scouts have done thousands of hours worth of work to get to you to this point. You have to do right by them and make the right choice there.
That sounds like music to my ears, man. I know a lot of Lions fans want to go need, and the biggest, brightest name on the board sometimes is not the best name on the board. So in this case, my next question was how many day one starters and then how many rotational players and meaningful snaps, for after the starters are on this board. And if I'm looking at your board, I'm saying, okay, here's your top four: Bailey, Reese, Bain, and Mesidor. And my goodness, between 6'6" and 6'5", you have a mess of players just stacked on top of each other that are going to give you, in my opinion, a lot of day two solid backups and even a few starters in here. So how would you say that this class ranks with how many starters, like blue chippers, and then starters and then rotational players do you have in the first couple rounds?
Yeah, so with our grading scale, 6'7" or above means we think you're a 3-down starter all over the NFL or the majority of teams. So we think there are 4 guys in this draft. You see them right there: Bailey, Reese, Bain, and Mesidor, who are 3-down starters that are going to be trusted against the run and the pass. Now, they have specialties, but they can play all three. Those 6'6" to 6'5" guys, we'll talk about them all as a whole, then I'll break them down a little more. But as a whole, those are either high-end first and second down guys, like really high-end, and have a little bit of a learning curve to do as a pass rusher, or the other way around. They're not great against the run, but they will get after the quarterback and have a very specific role. So I would look at anybody 6'7" or above as, hey, like these are the guys that could really start year one and should start, at least by day one, year two. If they don't start this year, 6'6" to 6'5", you will see them playing snaps every single game. These are the players, again, that are going to be either high-end pass rushers. We've got guys like Malachi up there. Like, he is not talked about, in my opinion, enough as maybe he should be. His get off and his ability to get after the quarterback is really good. Now, there are age concerns. There are potentially injury concerns. He's not good against the run, which is why he's that step down. Those 6'6" guys, too, look at it this way. They were that close to being a 3-down starter despite lacking those skills. Keldric Faulk is another one of those guys, high-end run defender. He just is not a good pass rusher right now, and everybody that talks about him should be talking about potential as a pass rusher.
Oh, yeah.
That's a key that he does not have it currently.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said about him. And I've let just about everybody know that's listened to this channel. That's exactly how I view Faulk. And quite honestly, I view him as a Brad Holmes and a Dan Campbell kind of guy. Run stuffer on day one, that big edge. But I'll digress. We'll get into that in a little bit later. Let me ask you one more quick question. So I see Barham down here at 6'2". What happens between 6'4" and 6'0"? Because it's 5'9". I mean, in 5'8", there's another big bulk of players. And I'll tell everybody about that here in a little bit, because one of my questions is the drop zone, as I call it. But what happens between 6'4" and 6'0"? You got one guy listed. How do you categorize that individual? And what is his likely potential?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to direct you to a different part of our site, if you don't mind. If you want to go to the glossary, and I'll show you exactly why there's that drop zone just click that window right there. And so click on the edge at the top, just right there. So this is why you don't see players there. There are no 6'4" or 6'3" edges with our scale. Now, this is very purposeful. This is because if you are a low-end starter as an edge rusher, you have a ton of value. Now, it's a little different on our list. It's a first and second down player or a third down pass rusher at a high level. But basically, if you aren't a starter, there's a drop from edge player compared to a quarterback. There are 6'4" quarterbacks. There are 6'3" running backs. There are 6'3" defensive tackles. So that's why you see that drop. It's built into our system so you can clearly see who's a starter versus who players that we don't believe our starters are. And now the 6'2" is a backup with true position flexibility. What that means is, Barham, for Michigan, we believe he could be a good backup at multiple positions. It's not he can play multiple positions. We think he's a good backup at multiple positions. So that's why you have that drop there. 6'0" to 6'1" is developmental prospects. So, I don't think there's any really in this, but maybe Rueben Bernard would be a guy that if you think he's got an all-pro potential, that's where you would put him in that. And there's, in this draft class, we didn't feel like there was anybody worthy of that one. To be fair, again, we do go off game film, so we didn't take a look at him in depth. But that's why there's that drop zone. It's built in so you can clearly separate starters, 3-down or specialty starters versus the backups.
I can't believe you just mentioned Rueben Bernard. I'm excited about him. I hope he gets a chance someday. Whether it's this year or next year, I hope he gets a chance to at least just show the freakish ability that he has. All right, so let's get into the rest of this. So I guess my fourth topic, which is a big topic for me, is arm length. And so how important is arm length for you when you're evaluating the edge defender or the pass rusher or the defensive end? And then without really going into great detail on specific players, I know we're going to talk about a few. Where does the arm length kind of stack up for SIS in these scouting profiles?
Yeah, I would love to say that arm length doesn't matter and just everybody can be treated the exact same, but unfortunately, that's not the real answer. When you have subpar arm length, you aren't able to attack the offensive player before he can attack you, right? Because we're not just talking about from their position. We're talking about the players across from them. Offensive tackles have 33, 34, 35-inch arms. And if they can hit you before you can hit them, you're going to be neutralized quicker. They're going to be able to lock their hands on you. They're going to be able to disrupt your rush pattern. So you have to be able to try to combat that. Now, there are ways you can work around that with less arm length. I think, again, without going to specifics that you talked about, we saw Bain this year do a great job against high quality tackles, making an impact. But at the NFL level, everything steps up. You're going to get bigger, faster athletes who are more technically skilled, and you're not going to be able to win consistently with effort, which is a big reason why he was really effective at his role. And so we need to see arm length to really, if you don't have it, you really have to be special in other categories. And again, if you have plus arm length, it also gives you a little more time to develop other aspects of your game because you have that attribute teams look for. So if you have a ton of pass rushing moves, but you aren't effective with them and have arm length, we can hopefully try to teach you how to be a little more effective with maybe one or two of them. And then you use the arm length to get around it in a different way. So I'd love to say it doesn't matter, but it does. The film is the most important thing for sure, but usually when you have short arms, it shows up on film, and when you have long arms, again, shows up on film.
Yeah, you made a great point the other day. How you mentioned that NFL franchises, when they look at players, it's more so what they are doing on the field and the agility scores and the freakish abilities that they have. They're absolutely going to go after some of the players that have the better ability, right? The better agility, the better length, and they're going to try to mold that player, to the best of their ability later too. So I guess to your point here on arm length, I've been a stickler with arm length. I know a lot of people get sick of me talking about it, but I talk about it with every player because I think that when you're looking at a player that, little subpar here, but you got great arm length, can I work with one or can I work with the other? I can't teach speed, but we can teach technique. And I think that when you have the rest of it, the length, the strength, and the power, the technique can usually be taught. But if you're not aware of your surroundings and if you don't have any speed to work with, it's kind of tough if you don't have any of the other requisites, right, for the position. Bailey and Reese, the two highly talked about edge defenders this year. One at Texas Tech. Man, Texas Tech has just been turning out amazing football players the last few seasons. And then Arvell Reese, the stud from Ohio State. Two different types of athletes. Where would you like to start? I think Bailey is at the top of your board. You want to start with Bailey?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's start with Bailey. And let me get the big board open for you real quick.
Yeah.
And then if you'd like, I'll pull open a scouting report, or you just tell me where you want to go.
Yeah, just click on it. We'll just stick on the overview to start with. David Bailey is easy. This is an easy report for a lot of people to see because he is really good at what he's really good at. He has an explosive first step. He knows how to use his hands, and he can just fly across the field. Pass rushing as an all-time premium. If you're an edge rusher, pass rushing is the most important thing. I love run defenders. I want everything that comes with that, but you have to be able to get after the quarterback because this is a position where it matters. Defensive tackles have to be able to stop the run and maybe do both, but he's got it. So again, we're kind of looking at his traits, physical traits right there. He has that arm length. Even so, 6'4" is what we would call probably that standard edge size. I wouldn't say it's, anything crazy right in there. It's light blue. It's about average. But with those 33 3/4 inch arms, almost 34, that's great length, big hands, and he's fast, explosive, which is what you see on those testing numbers on the right with his vertical jump. So we have all the physical attributes we want. Then we come down, and he's a winner. He gets after the quarterback right off his first step. Everybody that watched the Oregon game was just astounded with how quickly he could kind of get after some of those quarterbacks. There are times where the offensive tackles in college couldn't even touch him, and he just finds a way to win. He's bendy. He understands how to use his hands. That's not a trait a lot of athletic pass rushers have at a young age because they can rely on their speed. He's already developed his hand use. He doesn't take any plays off. And again, one of my favorite little things, if you want to put him on special teams, he's just going to dominate consistently. A very minor thing. I wouldn't put him on special teams, but always a fun thing. So we look at his metrics. Those speak for themselves. Just those are his rank against these edge rushers in this draft class. he gets after it. He is 12% above expected percentage, pass rushing percentage above what he was expected this year. That's astounding. That means that based on where we thought he lined up, the team he went across from, the player, how often he was asked to rush, he generated pressure at a 12% higher rate, and 11% quick pressure rate too. So you can see it's right off the bat. So this is a player, if your team drafts, be excited. He is an exciting player. There's a little bit to do with his run game stoutness, but he's not a bad run defender. He makes a lot of backside plays. He gives a lot of effort in that. It's just that he's not the strongest player for his weight, but it's not a weakness. It's just not as exciting as his pass rushing ability.
The few big numbers that I take away of this, or the few bigger metrics that I pay attention to more often, is the quick pressure, 11%, and then also the TFLs per game. And I guess I'm just a big – I love the guys that don't just get sacks. I love the guys that get their hands up and bats the ball down or gets into the backfield. You have 4 plays on any given, possession, right? And you can affect the game on any given play, but there's more potential ball carriers or receivers of the football than there is quarterbacks. And so the more TFLs you're racking up, you have more of an opportunity to get a TFL than you do a sack on every play. And so when I see a guy that's getting 1.6 TFLs per game, and he's the second highest rated in this class, that tells me that he's not just looking for the sack all the time. He's looking to make a play. And could you speak to the quick pressure? He's ranked number 1 this year. I feel like the quick pressure has kind of been lost in this whole metrics, analytics spectrum of all these different sites. But the quick pressure, that's the way that 20 years ago, that's the way that you evaluated these guys, how quickly they were able to get to the quarterback, and anything under 2.5 seconds was that number. And I think now it's even gone up to, in some analytic sites, up to 3 seconds they're calling a quick pressure, which I don't buy it. But could you talk to both of those real quick?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if you read our article that came out yesterday or 2 days ago, but it talks about projections for the NFL. And one of the best projectors, based on the research we've done and the metrics for college players for the NFL at the edge rusher position, is TFLs per game. It's one of those things that tracks really well for exactly what you're talking about. It's not that you are making a bunch of really reliable plays in a row. You're making those splash plays that change offensive possessions, even if it's a tackle for loss, right? A sack usually is more valuable because you lose more yards. But if you take, a sack for 4-yard loss and a tackle and a run for a 4-yard loss, it's essentially the same. So, our tackle for loss numbers we see there are a great indicator of the kind of player he is. They are sacks, but there are also run plays and, even limiting scrambles to 0 yards in college, which is not a sack in college, is a big deal. And that quick pressure rate, it's also just not the fact that he was this year, but over the last 3 years, he's been at 11% or higher, which is astounding. So again, he's not a one-year wonder. This year was the first year he was playing for Texas Tech, so that's when people noticed him. But at Stanford, even though his sack numbers might not be overly impressive, 13.5 over 3 years, that's okay. He was getting after the quarterback. He just played for Stanford, so he didn't get quite the opportunities to get after him. He didn't have the teammates around him either. And now this year was by far his most pressure-filled year on top of that. But that quick pressure rate, again, is just, you can see how disruptive that is. Anytime you watch a football game and there's somebody in the quarterback's face early, that play usually doesn't go well. And this is a great indicator of the kind of rate he can generate right off the snap.
So you mentioned article. Where can we find these articles if we're looking for the latest and greatest from SIS?
Yeah, that's just that. So we have 2 sites. So our draft site is nfldraft.sportsinfosolutions.com. Our standard site is sportsinfosolutions.com with our articles that are published there. This one was called Scouts versus Stats. Really interesting. Apparently the stats hate numerous ones of my reports, which I always like to talk about Alex about too, which is fun. But that's on there. It's also, for what it's worth, we're posting our internship opportunities coming up. And that is being posted, I think, next Monday. On Monday we bring on about 100 interns for the fall to help us do some data collection. We'll put you through scout school so you can learn what it actually means to be a scout and what you're looking for there too. So while we're talking about it, I might as well plug the internship.
Absolutely, man. So if you want to know more about scouting, here's your opportunity. They're going to put you to work.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
So I just pulled that up. I'm going to have to dig into that later. I love it. All right. So next up, Arvell Reese. Look, there's not much to not love about this guy. I think he's going to be a pretty special athlete here at the next level. He's already proven to have been an incredible ball player for Ohio State. Let's talk about it, man. How do you see Arvell Reese fitting at the next level? And then I didn't ask you this about Bailey, but 3-4, 4-3, where do you see him projected best? And then I guess probably in the top 5 or 6 teams in the draft, where do you see him going?
Yeah, I would have him as a 3-4 outside linebacker. He's not great in coverage, but he can do it. He's quick enough to definitely get back. And when he stands up, he's really explosive. I think David Bailey, I would say somewhere between 2 and 6. It's a little tricky because a lot of those teams have very kind of specific needs near the top, and they may prefer Arvell Reese, which I'll get to in a sec. So I could see him going for 6, but again, if you're at any team in that range and get him, consider yourself lucky. If you take him with the 2nd overall pick, and that's a totally valid opportunity for him. That's not an overpay. When you get to Arvell Reese, the only thing before we get into all his assets, you just have to find a specific role and try to hone in that skill. He is all potential right now, and what he's already shown is incredible. But we just have to see what role teams want him. So we did write him up as an edge. There are some teams that are talking about moving him to like more of an off-ball role, kind of being a little more of a hybrid player, which could take a little time to try to figure it out. But he is, those strengths listed right there are perfect. Imposing play strength, excellent burst to pursuit, and role versatility. He is somebody that's going to give physical presence on that team while flying around the field and willing to do whatever you want. His numbers from the combine results are a little bit blue, but that's really because it's an edge rusher. And again, it's not a perfect description for him. So as an edge rusher, he's average height, slightly below average weight, nothing terrible, 32.5-inch arms, just maybe a hair below. But again, because of everything he brings, nobody is concerned about any of those. Runs extremely fast, brings tenacity to the team, is able to play all over the field and gets off the line quick. So again, a lot of his things that are positives are going to have to be further developed at the next level. He's not somebody that's going to just come in day one and be a lockdown one role player, but he is going to come in and be an exciting piece for any kind of offense, or any kind of defense that wants to bring him in. So we like him best as an edge for sure. There was some talk amongst ourselves on, especially early in the process, where do we kind of want to put him? Do we feel like this is his best role? Because again, you look at some of his stats, not all of his stats are impressive. But again, it's because he was asked to run a rush from the outside, drop into coverage. He's only had 2 years worth of playing, and really just kind of, I think it's just 1 year as a starter, right? I'm not missing anything. Yeah, 1.5. He played
1.5.
Yeah, he played some last year, but didn't have the same kind of a role he was expected this year. So big projection, but given his defensive coordinator and linebackers coach at Ohio State, everything he's shown so far, this is a massively optimistic player that could easily be the number 1 player in this draft in 3 years. We just like his projection just a tad lower in 2, but second edge, 4th overall player. Again, a player that I would expect to go between 2 and 6. And any team in there, totally valid.
So you mentioned moving him to off ball. Could you explain for the audience the difference between being up on the line, defensive end, off ball, outside linebacker? Could you just explain what the difference is for everybody?
Yeah, so when we're talking about edge players, we're talking about a combination of like defensive ends and outside linebackers that tend to rush the passer. So edge players are the players that their primary responsibility is to play on the outside of the box, right outside the tackles, near the line of scrimmage. And these players have to be kind of freaky athletes that find ways to get around and get into the backfield. And so their field of vision is really just right in front of them in the backfield at the line of scrimmage and trying to win that matchup. And if you make a couple really good plays a game, you're an all-pro player, right? 1 or 2 sacks a game gets you to an all-pro season. When we're talking about off-ball linebackers, those are the players, the middle linebackers that stand, 3 to 4 yards behind those players, and they can be Mike, which is a middle linebacker, traditionally the captain or the green dot of the defense. Will, which is the outside, mostly a coverage linebacker, kind of on the outside, and then Sam, which is the strong side. And that's kind of more of a run defense. We do have a couple players that fit that role, but kind of a run defense, bring in your base package, third linebacker. And those players don't have to make as many plays behind the line of scrimmage necessarily. They're not necessarily strictly pass rushers. They have to do everything and have a bigger vision, which is the number one thing we want to look at for them, because when you're at that second level, you have to see everybody in front of you, organize all the players to your side. When you're in coverage, you're in a bigger space and have to operate more area. And so because of that, you have to have a great awareness. First level players really just have to worry about their matchup ahead of them. Second level players have to worry about everything going on ahead of them. So if we're going to move somebody to off ball, it means that we think that their best role is kind of seeing the field as a whole. They can kind of impact a bunch of different ways, but they might not get the opportunities to rush the passer. An edge rusher might get 300-400 opportunities to rush the passer. An off-ball linebacker maybe gets 75 to 100 if they blitz a lot. So when those players, you're probably not taking advantage of their pass rushing ability as much as their run defense, their leadership, their ability to move in space as well.
Yeah, I think it's a huge importance to be able to segregate the two, because oftentimes, you see players that get drafted and for whatever reason, everyone, seems to label guys as an edge, and they don't delineate the fact that was an off ball. He was in a 3-4, much different opportunities depending on where they line up. And so I'm glad that you just went through that, so that maybe for the casual fan that doesn't know this or doesn't pay attention to it, it's the aha moment. Now I get it. I understand it. And man, I call that the trash in that second level, when those middle linebackers, those inside linebackers in a 3-4 scheme, they're just in the trash, man. Their heads just spinning, and you have to have that awareness. Everything's coming at you, whether it's a running back or a tight end crossing or a slot receiver. These guys are gifted at what they do. So for Reese, I hear the better talk about him has been pushing him to the outside. As of late, from Daniel Jeremiah and others, I've heard mentioned that, pushing him to the outside, being that true edge. Did you mention that you could see him moving back a little bit too in that second level?
I think it depends on what the team that drafts him really.
But he has a fluidity though. He has a duality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would say if I'm drafting Reese, I'm putting him at edge for probably 80% of snaps and then moving him off ball more. So kind of like Abdul Carter for the Giants. Even Micah Parsons occasionally, right, goes into that off ball role. When you're kind of thinking about his usage, those are kind of the players I would look to on how to maximize it. Because again, both of those players can play an off ball role, but I think they have a better impact for their team as pass rushers. And that's what I would do with Reese. I think that you can find starting Mike and linebackers in the middle rounds of the draft. You can't find dynamic pass rushers in the middle rounds of the draft. You have to find them early or try to develop them, I guess, later. But usually, that your splash pass rushers are in that first round where you can find starting linebackers. Danny Stutzman, great example last year for Oklahoma, our number one linebacker for off ball. And he went the fourth round, and he started every game this year, or just about every game for the Saints, and had a great season. You can find those players later. You can't find players that play on the edge with this kind of tenacity. So I think Sonny Styles, which is a true off-ball linebacker, is a rare exception for that, where he'll probably go top 10 despite not bringing that, because of everything he brings to a defense as well. But if I'm Reese, I have Reese on my team, I want him to make the biggest impact. And for me, that's on that edge position.
One of the more polarizing players of this draft class has been, there's been quite a few, but Rueben Bain. Rueben Bain coming in with what, by my measure, no pun intended, all the pun intended, short arms, right? He's got the short arm syndrome. I call that the T-Rex syndrome. I don't know where his best fit is right now, because he's just so tenacious. He's such a good football player. He really can get after it, and then the arm length shows up at times. And I want to, if I could remember what I wrote on the guy a couple of times, I want to say his missed tackle percent was about 15.8% last year. Maybe you guys have that in your stats here in just a moment. But that, to me, shows up more when I see a big missed tackle percentage. I directly correlate that to the shorter arms if they, in fact, do have shorter arms. The ability not to really wrap up instead of just trying to drive through and wrap up, in the tackle. So I see him as a fit as a 3-4 inside backer where he could really do some amazing work. Would you agree or disagree, and why?
I think it would be a mistake to move him off that front line. Or even, to be honest, on the interior as a starting capacity. You could move him down there on third down. But what he brings on the outside is an explosive get off. He gets off the line, but when he contacts, he is really strong, really tough, and never gives up on the perimeter. Honestly, he's probably in the top 5 most fun players to watch film on this year, just because of his effort is undeniable. That sub 31-inch arms, though, absolutely matters. And so because he doesn't have like a huge arsenal of tricks right now, he needs to find other ways to win, but he's going to impact the defense too. And then let's not forget, even though pass rushing is the most important, he is still a high level run defender on the perimeter who can set the edge and is tough and is hard to move out of his position consistently. Outside of that kind of length in the pass rushing, he does lose a little bit of discipline trying to work around players because he is quick. He's really quick around players. And because he has that, he tends to work laterally or left to right instead of just keeping discipline in that lane. So there are some things to clean up with him. But again, his strengths are clear. When it comes to that broken missed tackle percentage, I believe he has a career broken missed tackle percentage of 15%. I think this year he dropped it to 13, according to our numbers. So slight improvement. I do think it could be an issue for sure. That's higher than you want to see for a defensive lineman, because defensive linemen don't get as many opportunities. You don't see that number being super high if they're NFL prospects. If they're not NFL prospects and playing at some low-level college, then that's fine. But you don't see that. But you also don't generate 73 pressures in a season if you don't know how to get after the quarterback, right? Everybody knew he was trying to get after the quarterback and got there. One of the other, right on that page you're on, one of the interesting metrics we like is that ATD plus metric. So what that means is average tackle depth plus. So it takes where you make the tackle on the field compared to what we expect you to have it. So anything north of 100 is very good. So 100, is kind of average. So we see him 3 straight years, especially these last 2 years, making far more tackles behind the line of scrimmage than we expected. That's a good metric to me when I look at that. He doesn't have a huge tackle share percentage, but again, because he's a defensive lineman, you don't want to see that necessarily be super high. I'm seeing a lot of tackles for loss just on those metrics there. Broken missed tackle, a little higher than I like, probably not a deal breaker for me. And his relentless effort, I think, can clean that up a little bit too. He's going to make plays outside of his range, which kind of compensates in my mind for missing some of those tackles. So yeah, we're fans for sure. I do think teams are going to be creative on how they maximize his opportunities. But again, on third down, he could absolutely rush from the interior, and then you have your longer guys on the outside. Then you create a lot of mismatches. So there are some concerns. He is not a slam dunk 10 sack guy a year prospect, but I think everything he's shown on film shows me a player who is willing to do everything it takes to help his team win. And that's always a big plus in my book.
Talking with Jeff Dean here, Sports Info Solutions, the defensive end breakdown. And we have one more player here that is in the top 4. I'm going to quickly show the matrix here for Sports Info Solutions and how these players will vertically align for you. If you do check out NFLDraft.sportsinfosolutions.com. And so we've talked about Bailey, Reese, Bain, and now Mesidor, which has been mocked to the Detroit Lions, if you're a Detroit Lions fan, quite a bit. This is one of the more intriguing players. I've said a few times, I don't know if Bain benefited from Mesidor or if Mesidor benefited from Bain, because these two players just get after the football. Mesidor's 25 years old. He's going to be entering the NFL as one of the much more older players. A lot of analysts, including myself, will say that he has that high floor. He can help a team win instantly. You know, he's going to be someone that can come in the door and help you with leadership, but also have a higher level of FBI, football intelligence. How would you, I guess, equate the age factor and the best team or scheme fit with Mesidor? And I guess, what are your thoughts about the higher floor scenario and being able to instantly come in and maybe have a little bit higher of ability to help a team win today versus having to wait?
Yeah, I think it's kind of an interesting dynamic. So on our, there are edges 3 and 4 on our board, but on our big board, there is currently an 11 spot difference. So in our mind, even though they're, kind of those edges that are close comparatively, on our overall board, we do see there's a decent drop off between them. And I think the age absolutely is a concern, or concern, maybe not the right word. It's a factor in the decision to take. We have a 3rd-year player in Bain. We have a 6th-year player in Mesidor who has a high-risk injury tag from our injury department too. So it's not just that. He has a real chance of having a long list of career injuries, or at least having it take him out of a lot of games, and those need to be factored in. So I do like the fact that he can come in and be somebody that can start from day one and have a lot of experience. There are limitations with exactly what he can do, and again with what Bain can kind of bring to the table with his effort is something I see Mesidor not quite having the same impact with. I think, by the way, for what it's worth, I think Mesidor is not loading on the site right now.
Yeah, he's not. I was just having trouble with it too.
I'll message our team and see if we can get him up soon. But and so anyways, but I like Bain's tenacity, his effort and strength to kind of project a little bit into that NFL role where he kind of can dominate one-on-one matchups. Mesidor doesn't quite have that same ability, and he's more of just that guy that he's going to get it done. He's going to have his big plays. He definitely benefited from Bain. I think they benefited from each other. But I am concerned about that age, and I'm concerned about that injury history. Now, our ratings don't take those into consideration, age a tiny bit, because we just want to see what they do on the field and let the team doctors determine what they want to do with that injury report. But yeah, if I'm a team and I have Bain or Mesidor on the board, in my opinion, it's a pretty easy call, and I would take Bain in that situation. So yeah, I like what he brings to the table. I like his reliability, but he also took until this year to really kind of blow up and have that year. Even Bain last year had a great year, or 2 years ago in 2024 had a great year. So Mesidor is kind of that late bloomer, like Romello Height out of Texas Tech, that you do have to see if you're going to get that production to continue.
So were any of his injuries, do you think, I guess, more of that concern factor that maybe it took him a little bit of time because he was nursing the foot injuries? I think it was 2 seasons worth, wasn't it, where he was missing significant time, or was it mostly 2024 where he missed significant time? I don't have his information in front of me right now, so can't remember.
I'm gonna pull it up. I believe he had 2 years worth of serious injuries. And again, when our injury team looks at a player, they kind of have a couple big red flags for players. So one of the things, for instance, offensive linemen with back issues, it's almost a career deal breaker. If you have a back issue as an offensive lineman, massive red flag. When it comes for repeated injuries for explosive positions like an edge rusher on the lower body, that's a big red flag too, right? So if you have multiple ACL tears in the same knee injury, odds are that might continue for it. So yeah, he tore ligaments, only played in 2 games in 2023 in both feet, actually, if I recall that correctly. 10 games, 13, 11, that injury. So no, it was actually just 1 game. So one season. So 1 season worth of injuries. We had 5 years of high level double-digit games playing. And so he had some success early. For those of you who remember, at West Virginia, had some success there, kind of made the transition to Miami. And even though he had some solid years, he didn't have the year like he had this year. So again, like in 2024, 9 tackles for loss, really good year. That's not a bad year at all. But this year, 17 and a half or something crazy.
Big jump.
And so basically doubling that production. And he had a couple more games, to be fair, but he had a lot of that production against really good teams as well. So I think it balances out. And I do like the fact that he also just had 4 forced fumbles. fumbles aren't always the best indicator of a turnover player on this level, right? Because they're a little bit random. But if you see that couple times throughout his career and you kind of total him over the career, you can see players that make impacts, right? Jacob Rodriguez out of the Texas Tech made a ton of plays this year, but forced fumbles and interceptions. And even if a couple of them were lucky, not all of them were lucky. So you just want somebody that's around the ball and make plays. And I think this is a guy that has that.
I do too, man. So where do you see Mesidor right now as far as a best scheme fit at the next level? Is he going to be more apt to having a better transition from Miami to the NFL in a 4-3 or a 3-4?
Good question. Give me 1 second. Let me pull him up. I think I would like him better as a 4-3 defensive end. I definitely like Bain more as a 4-3 for sure. Kind of that explosive get off the ground. I would probably put Mesidor in that same category. He also has a little bit of shorter arms, which means that if you can limit him to like a one gap role, so there are players that have to take two gaps. In other words, they have to line up head over somebody and manage two gaps. And for those players, you want really long arms because they have to be able to reach both sides. But when you have a 4-3 defensive end, you're really just playing on the outside hip of the tackle and don't have to worry as much about the inside of the tackle because your 3 tech will help you out. And so because of that, that's where we like him as that 4-3 defensive end. And again, just like Bain, he can also reduce down. There are some similarities with how these guys are built and their kind of role for the next level, but that's where I would put him.
And so you're thinking like in the 3-4 where they have to pick up multiple gaps, at least gap and a half or 2 gap, that's where you could run into some trouble with possibly the arm length there or the size.
And in a 3-4, for him to be an edge, he would have to be more of that, outside linebacker role. So he'd have to drop into coverage more often, right? So a 3-4 defensive end is actually a defensive tackle, a 5 tech. And so they're going to be taking on 2 big gaps on both sides of the tackle. And so that's where you see those big, strong players that like to hold up guys. J.J. Watt, great example.
Mm-hmm.
And a player like that, if he were to play in those positions, and Mesidor doesn't quite have, either that length or size to really hold up. You want those guys to be extra big because they have to match up with tackles. But
so next up on your big board here is TJ Parker. TJ Parker, another name that has been mocked to the Lions in plenty of mock drafts, and he's coming in as a 6'6" on your NFL draft matrix. Let's talk about TJ Parker. I really like TJ. I think he's shown some pretty decent tape this last year. And I was surprised to see him ahead of a lot of other players. Could you explain maybe why he's behind a player like Mesidor, who he has 3 years on? I mean, as far as his youth, he's a bigger player. I mean, they're about the same height and size, but from a length perspective, TJ Parker seems to have more of that requisite size that you're looking for out of a defensive end. I mean, just a little bit longer of a hand, but I guess go ahead and explain, what do you think about TJ Parker? Why would he be behind Mesidor right now?
Yeah. So when we're looking at Parker, the difference between a 6'6" and a 6'7" is we think Mesidor, again, we're not taking in health into consideration, could be starting through all 3 downs. He has the necessary run defense ability and the pass rushing ability to be relied upon, not just be there, but be relied upon in those stats. TJ Parker, we think it's just one step down, and he's kind of lacked the pass rushing ability this last year and a half. He hasn't shown us enough to warrant that 3 down ability, but it was close. Again, top 6'6" edge rusher on the board. So we kind of see him being somebody that you're going to want to play on 1st and 2nd down right away. And he'll see a few 3rd downs a game. But again, he's maybe not the guy that you bring in specifically to get sacks. He's maybe the guy you bring in to cause a stunt that frees another guy to get free on those sacks. When we look at a little bit of the stats and the pass rushing ability too, like we see the pressures were consistent for these 2 years, but in 2024, 12 sacks versus 5 sacks this year. So that's the number that a lot of people want to focus on. I'm looking more at the pressure and seeing that's the same for year to year. He just converted more of those sacks or compression to sacks, which is important, but there are other ways to evaluate his ability. He gets a pressure rate just above average for his career, 3% above expected, essentially. That's that pressure plus minus you see there. We don't see him kind of make a ton of extra plays. So that number, that 3% at the bottom right there, for a couple of the top pass rushers in this draft, like David Bailey, for instance, was 10%. So we're seeing drastic differences in there. 3% is good. It's not elite in that measure. And again, as the quick percentage, David Bailey, over 10%, whatever there. Quick percentage is 4. He doesn't generate a lot of quick pressures. He gets some cleanup pressures. He gets some that he needs his teammates to help him in. So we really like TJ Parker and believe that he's definitely probably a guy that has more upside than somebody like Mesidor. But again, with our grading scale, day 1, year 2, Mesidor just gets that slight bump because he's ready as an NFL defender, run defender, and pass defender today.
So I was just looking through some of this, the big drop off from last year to this year. I can't remember if he had any injuries or not that held him back. But was there any scheme changes, do you think, that Clemson was going through, or personnel losses that maybe impacted his position at all? Or do you not really consider a lot of that when you look at a player for just a player of who they are? I guess, does any of that come into consideration from year to year when you look at scheme changes, for instance, like Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart, coming out of was it A&M just last year, and there was a lot of scheme change that from Nick Scorton's year at Purdue, 12 sacks, was leading the big, and then he goes to A&M, and it's just or was it Tech? I'm sorry, it was A&M. And then he has a little bit of a lack of production, and I remember like the big conversation was, well, he doesn't have a whole lot of production. I don't think that this is going to be a good guy at the next level. His sack production is down, and then he goes in his first year. I think he pulled down 6 sacks last year and missed a few games. Nobody expected that. I mean, I thought that he was going to be just fine. I mean, I wasn't expecting a 10-sack season, but I thought the 6 sacks that he produced was equivalent to what you should expect for a rookie to do. I think it was more than what a lot of the general populace thought that Nick Scorton was going to be able to produce. I guess so. Speak to that a little bit. Does the production outweigh the athleticism, or is it the athleticism that really outweighs the production when you look at what the possibility is for that player at the next level?
Sure. I do think there is a couple key differences in those two players. So we'll just start with Nick Scorton, then I'll answer your question a little after. So Nick Scorton, one of my favorite players in the draft last year, by the way. We had him as a 3-down starter. We loved him. Not only was it a different scheme, he put on 30 pounds to fit that scheme. And so in my report, I'm like, he needs to lose 30 pounds. He's not this. Wouldn't you know it, right before his pro day, he was down 30 pounds from his playing weight, looked way better, more like his old self, and then got into his team. He went to a scheme that maybe didn't fit him, but also changed his body composition and didn't play that. And that factors in for sure. There are players in this draft class for sure. I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. I'm sure I could, that played out of position at their college, that they have a better role at the NFL, and they were misused. When it comes to somebody like TJ Parker, though, his scheme didn't really change. He's playing next to Peter Woods, who has an incredible ability to stop the run as well and play on that team. They were not nearly as good this year, so they weren't playing from a lead perspective a lot, so he doesn't have as many opportunities to rush the passer. But we also factor that in kind of with our stats and our write-ups. So with our stats, right, his pressure percentage this year was actually higher, but it was lower than his pressure plus minus went down because the opportunities he was given were cleaner. They were easier. He was one-on-one and didn't have those chances. So we factor that in. And then I don't think production is a pillar of this position. I don't think you have to have it, but it's a red flag when it's missing. So he's not at that level, by the way. I think that his 5 sacks is a quality baseline. If you were to have 0, though, I'd absolutely be concerned. I don't want an edge rusher that has 0 sacks in college, because what are they going to do at the next level? But I think that he will have to prove to teams that he can kind of get after it. And I thought this last year, again, his run defense starting day 1 quality, his pass rusher, he just needs more moves. He's also not super bendy. So even though he's got some athletic ability for sure, he's not bendy. He doesn't have that elite twitch either. firing off the line with so much force and quickness like you would see with somebody like Bain or David Bailey as well. So there are just kind of those a couple limitations that take him down just a little bit for us.
So up next on the draft matrix here, you have, we just talked about TJ Parker. And so now you've got a couple more players that a lot of Lions fans have been excited about. Faulk, Howell, Jacas, Young, and Malachi Lawrence is kind of down there. Danny Dennis Sutton. So there's a few more players coming up that I'd like to touch on here before we run out of time. So let's jump into Keldric Faulk. Now this is a player that I absolutely love what he puts on film. I love the fact that he's a run stuffer right now, and that the pass rush upside is coming, right? I mean, you can see that it's kind of there, but that's not why you're bringing that guy in. I think for the Lions, when you're looking at what they love on that strong side, is they need a run stuffer. They need the 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" guy that's 265, 270, somewhere in that range that can go in and lock down an edge, right? And be able to affect the play, push the ball where the offense doesn't want the ball to go to. And then, stuff the run when it comes his way and be lateral enough to be, agile enough to be able to move. What are the best qualities of of Faulk, and what can he bring to a defense in year one?
Yeah, I think you hit most of the highlights right off the bat. I think the only other thing I want to throw in is he's very young. I think he's going to be 20 at the draft, third year junior, but on the younger side of it. So there is a lot of time for him to fully develop. But again, starting with the kind of the metrics and the size, 6'6", 276, over 34-inch arms. He has the length you want at that position for sure. He's not lacking in that, and that's why people like him. So this is my report I did, so I have a lot of film on him. Ideal frame at the position. He is also, like you mentioned, he's a day one NFL run defender, and not just going to kind of sit there and do his job, but he's going to make plays in the run game. He's able, with his strength and his length, to hold up against tackles, refuse to surrender that edge, and then collapse the line and make the tackle behind there. So he's able to create disruption in the run game, and that's a huge asset. Now, that pass rushing upside that everybody wants to see is there, but it still has to hit. That's the thing people kind of forget about these situations, is there will take time. It's not like he's just going to day one. I mean, maybe, I suppose, but most likely day one, he's not just going to turn into an elite pass rusher at the next level when he's going against better players. So it's going to take time. Again, this is a guy I would say, what you're going to get those first couple of years, and it's a 6'6" quality player. And if you want to turn him into that 6'7", 6'8" grade that we would give him, it's probably more of that 3 to 4 year project. But there is long stretches of games where he just disappears and you forget you have a first round talent on the field. He also had a lack of production this year, but again, some of those key metrics on that one, if you just want to stay on that one, that we have, even though the tackles for loss weren't there this year, we see the broken missed tackle percentage didn't change. The tackle share percentage about the same. He's not, again, making a ton of tackles. His average depth of tackle went up slightly. He still bounced ones at a high rate, and that final one right there, a positive point of attack percentage, or positive percentage at the point of attack, means he did his job at an above average level a lot. So I'm still seeing a ton of great numbers there to tell me that the tackle for loss just didn't quite have the opportunities. And again, anybody that watched Auburn football this year probably can see that, they weren't as good as some of their previous. I don't remember how good they were exactly in 2024, but I'm seeing that. And then when we go to the advanced pass rush stats, again, we see those percentages. His pressure percentage is 11%, which is low for a considerable first round pick, 1% above average, or what we expect, which is, again, not noticeable. 3% career quick pressure rate. He did get a little bit better this year with it, but still just there's nothing on that page that jumps out. And the best part about our site, in my opinion, is that we combine film, lots of film study. I write my report without looking at any of these numbers, and then we look at the numbers and see what they tell us. And there are a lot of overlaps here. The stats team and that article did not like him nearly as much as me. But again, that's where that projection and that ability to kind of hopefully see the realistic future for him comes into play. I think if you're an optimist, you see him as a 3-down starter in 2 years. I think if you're a pessimist, you see him as a 2-down starter. And if you're somebody like me, you're you're hoping that it's maybe a 3-year project where you can give him that extra year to kind of develop.
It's and by the way, I keep hitting, for some reason I keep tapping the glossary like it. Yeah, I don't know what happens there. It just skips the page. So I'm elated that you keep using the word project. Like, the more you keep saying it for a guy that could be a potential first-round draft pick, I love it. And the reason why is because Brad Holmes apparently picks nothing but projects and injured players, and I know that there's a lot of projects in every draft. I mean, every player is a project, but to that degree, there's some players that just require a little bit more to fill out their tool bag, and this is one. And this is one that can help you win from day one with the tool set that he has today. And then as he develops and he gets integrated into an NFL system, and is able to take care of his body at a much higher rate, those things do get better. And you're also working with guys that are at the elite pinnacle of their career, and you get to learn a few things. So I picked up on one thing that you were just talking about with Parker, and that was in the pass rush department, looking at the drop off. 7.5 sacks in 24. We had a little bit better of a season as far as production, 32 pressures. And then this last year, 2 sacks and 31 pressures. So he's still getting after it, just not closing business down on the back end as often as he was in 2024. Faulk, do you think he goes in round 1? I think for a lot of people, they kind of think he does. It really happens really depends on what happens with the offensive line, I think. But where do you see him going? As a best fit, if you will.
Yeah, I think that this is one of those guys that, again, the NFL is going to value a little higher than the general fans will, because, again, they're going to hope that pass rushing ability they're going to develop. They see that and they're going to go there. I probably see him going about 19 or 20. If I had to do it, we're going to do our mock draft, I think, on Monday. So we'll see exactly where we have him going. We're probably going to have him going a little higher, but I would say about that role, I would say he probably goes ahead of Mesidor, maybe close. There might be some teams that view Mesidor, again, like they want a 3-down starter off the bat and take him early. But again, some teams have a little longer time frame and they could view him a little higher.
Makes sense. That's if he gets past 17, right? I guess depends what happens with the Lions. So up next is, again, one of the players that a lot of people love. And they love his speed. They love the tenacity out of this guy. And that is Cashius Howell, edge out of Texas A&M. Yet another Texas A&M prospect here. Little small, and the arm length is not the greatest with Cashius Howell. And when I've looked at it, what I view Howell as at the next level is 3-4 inside linebacker or 3-4 outside linebacker, but I don't view him in a 4-3 scheme. I don't know what you think yet. We'll find out in just a moment. Could he survive in a defense like the Lions defense has and utilizes right now? Would be my back end question. But where do you see Howell best fitting scheme wise, and why? And then the arm length. We kind of talked about it with Bain. So is it the same kind of situation between these two guys, or are we talking about two totally different players here?
Yeah, so I would put him as a 3-4 edge rusher, outside linebacker. I would not move him to an off-ball role. A 3-4 inside linebacker would have a ton of run gap diagnosis responsibilities and a lot of communication things. And that's not really where you're going to get the most value out of him. So I would put him as a 3-4 outside linebacker. And I think we're seeing a much different player than Bain. This guy is more comfortable standing up and kind of playing on the perimeter and is going to kind of make his initial presence felt as a pass rusher. Bain is that guy that's going to start on the ground, and not a perfect comparison, but somewhat like a little bit like a Brandon Graham, a little smaller, compact edge rusher that just fires off the ball and finds ways to just disrupt the player in front of him. Howell had a lot of success, which we like to see this season. But again, kind of as we talking about, there are just different ways to kind of view that success. With given the team he played for and kind of his role there, that was his responsibility. He should have got after the passer a lot. Now, again, we think he's a day one pass rusher. He's going to play on probably almost every third down this season, hopefully, for whatever team takes him. But his ability as a run defender is just not there at this point. Doesn't set the edge strong, and that's where some of that length comes into play. He's not able to kind of keep offensive linemen off his chest. He gets swallowed up. He's tight hip too, so he doesn't have that kind of quick ability to change directions and react to runs that bounce inside or outside quickly. And he's just lacking some of that functional strength. I think he's probably naturally a strong person, but as that functional strength in the NFL, again, you have to find ways to win those leverage battles. And when you're a little bit tight-hipped and undersized, it's kind of hard to create that leverage. So I like him as a 3-4 outside linebacker who comes in as a day one, at least day 1, year 2, pass rusher on third downs who you want and is a game-changing type of pass rusher, but does not have the run ability currently to play all 3 downs. Small things, though, low injury risk, always a good thing. Has a lot of starting experience, which teams like at a high level as well. And again, pass rushing is just more valuable than run defending at this position. And that's where I think he's going to have a lot of suitors that want to use his services.
So there's a lot of conversation about the sub 31-inch arms and kind of where that is. Been in the NFL, like spent 20 years or something like that. The last time that there was a double-digit sack guy with sub 31-inch arms. Now, Cashius Howell measured in north of 30, but sub 31-inch arms. So is that not just a big glaring red flag for a lot of teams out there? I mean, you feel like he could start on every third down. You don't think that the arm length in his position is not going to have a bigger impact on where he gets selected in this draft? I guess, how would you view that? I mean, he's a little bit short in the arms, and the tackling has been a problem. The run game's been a problem. If he's just a sub-specialist, a third down specialist, if that's what his role is for the next couple of years or maybe forever, is he really a first-round talent?
Yeah, a couple good points there. I think right off the bat, a lot of teams are not going to view him as a scheme fit, because he doesn't have the ability to play as a 4-3 defensive end, really, or can play against the run on those. So a bunch of teams are just going to immediately say, this is not a guy we want to target in this draft, even if you fall. I mean, maybe once you get to maybe the 4th round, they might, but they're not going to consider him based on where they expect him to go and not a scheme fit. I do think there is a path for him to be a 3-down starter eventually. It's going to take work, though. And if you are a pass rushing specialist, you do provide a lot of value. There are teams that will pay a lot of money for players that just come in and rush the passer. So I don't think I would expect him to be a 10-sack guy, maybe ever, but definitely not in these first 2 years. At least I wouldn't expect it. But if you can generate 6 sacks like we talked about scoring, if you could just generate 6 sacks just coming in and playing 1 every 3 downs, you're fresh, you're energetic, you don't have to defend the run, that has value to the team, because then you're going to pair him with somebody that can do the run defense, and together you're going to get a complete player. So not a great example, but if you take Keldric Faulk and put him on the same, first and second down you have Faulk and third down you have Howell, you're going to love that combination, because they're always going to have a little extra energy. They're not playing all the snaps, and you're going to have players that come in and play the roles that they are designed to play. And again, there's nothing that says he can't find that overall, but yeah, that high-end designated pass rusher absolutely has a fringe first-round value, I would say. I would expect him to go early 2. There is a chance he'd go early 1, but I think there's enough other prospects with the arm length and that'll fit more schemes that might jump him.
So I have him at number 35 on my top 36. I do a small board. Everybody does a big board. I do a big board top 50, and then this year I said, I'm going to do the small board again. And in one of my takes on Howell, I said, evaluating Howell strictly as an every down edge rusher is a schematic trap. And so it sounds like you and I agree on that. The next player, I hope I'm saying his last name right. You might have this one on me, but Gabe Jacas.
Jacas.
Is it Jacas?
Jacas, just
Jacas.
no J.
No J. Okay, so I was putting the Spanish twist on it. All right, so let's talk about Gabe. So this is another player. I mean, 3rd or 4th one in a row here, kind of considering where these players are available in the draft, that has also been mocked heavily to the Lions. And so my question to you in the email today is strength, length, power. He has it. But who is he really? And why is he yet ahead of Young, Sutton, and Lawrence, who seem to be, in a lot of mock drafts, a lot higher than him? But in your big board and kind of where he's stacked vertically, man, those players are quite below where Gabe is. So let's talk about Gabe. I guess, who is he? And with the strength, length, and power, who is this guy? And can he put it together at the next level?
Yeah, I think you found my draft crush for this year. This is my dude. This is the guy I am trying to stay level headed about. But this is just a born football player who every team is going to love on their roster. So we'll just start again. We start off with the metrics: 6'4", 260. 33-inch arms, 10-inch hands, and 30 bench reps. We'll come back to that in a minute. If you've ever tried to bench press 30 times with 33-inch arms, that is a long way to move that. He is perfectly built to handle that outside. So just body type wise and kind of tenacity, again, we'll come back to it. We think Will Anderson out of for the Texans, again, not the same player, just the body type.
Yep.
Just somebody that's just broad shouldered, huge hands, long arms, just built to play that position. And there are a lot of traits that aren't measured basically anywhere that he's just going to excel on. He is just, toughness, doesn't necessarily show up on the stats, but extremely tough. When you watch him against pulling linemen, he attacks them and meets them in the backfield and throws everything he has at them. There are a couple teams that didn't, when they were pulling against him, tried to give him a little bit of shoulder stuff, and he would just destroy it. So he's willing to blow up plays. I will say the one thing I'm not sure why everybody only sees him as a run defender right now. I actually think he's probably got a better pass rushing ability currently, and then we'll come back to the run. But as a pass rusher, he's juice. He's energy off the edge. He fires off. He times the snap well, which is not an easy skill to do. His first step explosion has NFL ability. He throws a ton of moves at his opponent. Now, there are a lot of refinement things I'd want to see with his pass rush. I don't think he's always using the best moves for the situation. He tends to attack the same shoulder, but he'll throw counters at players, which is not, again, a skill always developed. He is not a bendy player because of how thick and broad he is. So again, he kind of has that trouble turning the arc through bend ability. How he kind of does it is tries to flatten it through his strength. So I think he's got a pass rush ability to, again, I wouldn't look at him as a 10 sack guy, but as a 6 to 7 sack guy consistently, I think is definitely within the realm of possibility, maybe 4 to 5 to start. And then as his run ability, he's a good run defender in the right situations. So he's strong. He can disengage from blocks, and he hustles after plays to get past the guys and work around him. But he's not somebody that can plant and hold. In other words, when he drops his hips and lunges into somebody, he doesn't have that ability to just kind of stay there. What he will do is just actively either attack them, which was try to disrupt somebody in the backfield, but then he exposes areas around him, or he'll try to work around them on the outside and give up a hole on the inside. So there was a ton to like here. Again, this is going to be your coach's favorite player no matter where he goes, because he is a tough football guy that I think I saw a quote. Somebody said they wants to run through your face. Great line for him. He had, 10 sacks this year, but he also had, 17 tackles for loss in back-to-back seasons. Again, not just getting after the passer, willing to be a high-end run defender. You'll see a few of those metrics there, though. Those advanced ones on the far right there do indicate that it's not always what it appears. So again, there are splash plays, which are the tackles for loss, but his average depth of tackle this year was his first year above 100 in the last 3. Again, not ideal. His bounce rate isn't as high as some of the other run defenders. In other words, players don't run away from him as much. They kind of are willing to take it because they think they see a hole. But the big key for me is that last number is when he's at the point of attack, he does have a really high positive percentage, meaning when players come at him, it usually doesn't go well for the offense. It goes well for the defense, and they get less yards than expected. Final point, 6 forced fumbles over the last 2 years. That's a great sign of his impact of creating turnovers and hitting hard and willing to do the dirty work. So, yeah, this is one of my favorite players in the draft for sure. We almost bumped him up higher, to be honest. There's always some debate, but absolutely love this player. And if your team drafts him in the second round, he's going to be a day one playmaker for your team and willing to do whatever it takes for your team to win.
I was not as impressed with with Gabe Jacas as much as I guess yourself included, other people have been, until it's the same thing. I was watching the wrong tape on a few players. I didn't watch the right games to kind of see where he showed up. And the one thing I could take from film to film to film was effort. Like, this guy does not stop. And then what I really love about a guy, especially off on the edge, is getting into the backfield and creating those TFLs. I know that I might be a little bit different in the way that I view things, but when I look, I said it kind of at the beginning of this podcast today, that TFLs to me are more important than a sack. I want to see a guy getting in the backfield, creating opportunity, or making opportunity for himself to affect the game. I'll say it one more time. You have 5 options anytime, on a play for an offense. You have 5 guys that you can drop for a sack or drop for a TFL if they're behind the line of scrimmage, right? You only have 1 quarterback. So I would love to see guys get more TFLs. And, of course, if you chip in 5, 6, 7 sacks in a season and 17 TFLs, I mean, that's a heck of a season at the next level. It's not going to start that easily for him, but I think, to your point, he could be the coach's favorite player at the next level. I like the size. He has the requisite size, of course. He definitely has the effort. He has the ability, and he's a later round guy. Where do you see him going right now? What round? What team fits maybe best? Is he definitely 4-3? Where do you see him going?
Yeah, so we actually have him as I think he's like a hybrid edge, because he's pretty good when he stands up, but I don't want him dropping into coverage. So a lot of those kind of money fronts you'll see where the 4-3 defensive end will actually stand up and kind of present a problem. So Danielle Hunter is a pretty good example of somebody that does that. That's kind of where I see him on the edge. But I think that, again, because of the intangibles that from everything I've heard with people that talk to him and interview him, they love everything about him. He's a former wrestler too. Everybody loves wrestlers because they are awesome at understanding leverage. I think he goes in the second round. I would be surprised if he slips to the third, but he could, just because of how many edge rushers are kind of in this range, and it'll depend on what the teams view. I think that there are so few players that are built like him that there is going to be value for that. I think you can find some pure speed guys and a few other players. You can find some pure power guys, but to find that kind of combination at this physical size, I think he goes late second round, but early third round isn't out of the question either.
So talking with Jeff Dean here with Sports Info Solutions about the 2026 NFL Draft edge class, defensive end class. I know that there's like 3 more players on the list, and really there's a couple that are really important to me, but I'd like to get your thoughts on why, number one, Malachi Lawrence, why is he so far down on your list? So he goes below that drop zone that I called it, but you kind of let us know what that means with your system. But he's ranked down at 68. Dennis Sutton is at 60. And Zion Young's at 44. So do you see a lot of those players, Dennis Sutton, Malachi Lawrence, possibly going in that third round as well?
Yeah, I think this is where you get far more range in where players will go. I will say that we do our board updates once a week after a couple film extra sessions. We specifically target a few players and traits. So Malachi Lawrence did get a slight bump from us. So I'll just give you. So he is going to go up to number 50.
Wow,
which is just ahead of Joshua Josephs. The main reason that he's 6'5" and not, we think, to be honest, there's a real chance he goes round 1. I would not be surprised at all, but he is not a finished product at this point. Again, there's a lot to like about him. He has got that athletic profile that is hard to find. He is, I just talked about Jacas for him. He is a all-out effort guy that has quick hands, and he is all over the field, but there are some major red flags that will have to be addressed. He is one of the worst tacklers in this draft at this position. He misses an absurd amount of tackles because he is just approaching with so much ferocity that he can't break down. He's a really high-end pass rusher. There is not that run defensibility right now at all. Like he'll get into the backfield, but it's more because of he's trying to make a huge play that he's not being disciplined when he's doing it. So again, he took down 5 running backs behind the field, 7 sacks, 12 tackles for loss. But a lot of those were at the expense of that average depth of tackle. You see the bounce rate being there. And again, just playing worse competition, you'd even want to see those numbers higher. But a 24% broken missed tackle rate is in 26 the year before, so it's not an anomaly, is horrible. That is, especially for defensive linemen who don't get a lot of attempts. So there are concerns, but this is absolutely a guy that is a high upside guy. Again, coming out of UCF, didn't always play the top tackles this year. The Big 12 had some good tackles, but not consistently across the board. And he will have to show that he can kind of get it done in some of those more unique ways. Again, struggles with discipline and run defense. Those are red flags. So bring him in on third down. I wouldn't trust him on first and second down, at least year one.
4-3 for him as well.
I would do 4-3, but again, it's kind of that hybrid where if he stands up, you're okay. I like him out of the ground. I think he's got a little better. I think he gets a little better jump when he fires up because he has a tendency to kind of play high. He's not he does not have the bend of some of the elite players in this draft. It's not bad, but it's not the guy that's going to sink his hips, sink his shoulders, and get around the tackle with just that kind of speed like David Bailey. So, I kind of like him in that 4-3, I think.
So 2 more players. Danny Dennis Sutton. First, I can't believe that Malachi Lawrence got an 18-point jump or 18-spot jump. But Sutton, he was just ahead of Lawrence. Do you know if he's moving anywhere on your board?
He is. Let's see. It'll be a minor move if he was. He's going to 64. Okay. Because there are a couple other players, like I said, that go around with a little extra to film and research. We try really hard not to be influenced by anybody outside, so we're trying not to. But again, when you watch, like I said, Ian Akor getting a little bit of a bump too this last week, we talked about that just because of his progression. We thought was a little closer. But yeah, Danny Dennis Sutton is a guy that came in with a lot of hype this year. Has the size and the athletic ability you just dream about at that position, but he just doesn't get off the edge well. He's not a bendy player. Didn't look like he really had a good plan when he was attacking. He would kind of just recklessly throw his body into the opposing tackle. So again, there's a lot to like and hopefully a lot of upside with a guy like this as well. We're talking about a consistent theme at these edge rushers. And at this rate, though, at the 6'6" to 6'5", you have a little more project because those aren't the finished products. But again, extremely strong, long player. He does have a motor that'll get going as well. Doesn't make a ton of mistakes overall, but we do just need to see those winning plays pop up more often.
And then lastly, I've got one guy on your board that let me go back and whittle it down here. Yep. Got one guy on your board that I'm interested in, and when I looked at his film the other night, I was intrigued. Of course, I would love to see Nadame Tucker somehow get extra arm length, but it's not going to happen. Patrick Payton out of LSU, 6'4", 7'8", 260 pounds. I was intrigued after watching some of his film the other night. Could you give us just a quick overview on him? Where does he belong? He has the requisite size, height, length, strength, speed, all that good stuff. Where are his deficiencies that have him so far down, and will he be able to turn it into something, at the next level? He's going to be a project. How long of a project, I guess, is yet to be seen. But could you give us a little insight on Payton here?
Yeah. Well, I'll start off by saying I don't know how much projectability this guy actually has because he has a fifth-year senior, and his weaknesses are more with that kind of that stuff you can't teach, that hip fluidity to kind of get around the edge of those quick wins. There has to be some of those, but we'll start with kind of, again, big player, like you mentioned. He is that ideal size at 6'5", 260, long arms, big hands, all that good stuff. I do think there's a reason he didn't fully test at his pro day. I'm hoping it wasn't because of injury. I can't recall if I saw that for him as well, but if it was because he was healthy and decided he didn't want to show it off, that's kind of a warning sign. But he just does not get after the passer effectively enough to warrant an NFL starting ability in that regard. Again, he plays stiff, so he can't turn those corners. He doesn't have that coverage ability either. So you are truly looking at just a pass rusher. 4-3 defensive end for sure. Is not disciplined at the point of attack, does not read plays overly well, is a poor tackler. Those are a lot of big issues to kind of overcome for those. I will say there is one thing. We did find a small code issue today in our stats. So it says, he has, where's the deflections? He has 9 career deflections in the pass rush ability on the far right. That's actually, he has had 22 in the last 4 years. So that's my favorite thing about him is he gets his hands up. It's all the time. And that's amazing. But what that doesn't equal is pressure, is sacks. And that's, again, what teams are looking for. It's a nice tool to have. But if you're either knocking passes down or getting to the quarterback, we don't want to see that. He was really effective in 2023. You see there, was on our board really early. We thought, hey, this might be a first-round guy. And he didn't improve. In fact, we would take it the other way, and we thought he got not a lot worse. He got a little worse in this last year at LSU. We thought maybe with James Machinery would help him, and we just didn't see that kind of explosiveness we were hoping that he would develop from that 2023 season. So valuable team player, somebody that absolutely, as a 5'9", that's a top backup for us that doesn't have versatility. But again, we do have to see pass rushing wins, and we didn't see that with him. We saw hands getting up, good effort, and a good run defender, but just kind of that limited tight hips tackling. There are too many issues to kind of warrant that high-end role for us.
All right. Man, there's so many more players. We could spend all day doing this, but I don't want to keep you away from, family and everything else you have going on in your life. Jeff Dean, if you could sum up today and the Edge class in a sentence or two, I guess, what would you say about this year's draft class? For the Edge.
For the Edge. Outside of David Bailey, you're probably not going to find a perfect edge rusher. So if you are looking for an edge rusher, try to find the positives in their film, because they won't all jump off of the page 100% of snaps, but even 3 or 4 great plays a game will turn the tide of a game. So try to find those plays and figure out where he can make that impact at the next level.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us again today. Sports Info Solutions, NFL Draft.sportsinfosolutions.com, and find all of the big boards, the matrix, everything that you want to know about this draft class. It's right there. Appreciate you, Jeff. It's always a pleasure, man. And we'll catch you on the next one.
Thank you.
All right, brother. Take care.
See ya.
All right. Great info again from Jeff Dean, man. Jeff, I'll catch you. I'll send you an email here if you're still in the back studio there. I'll send you an email and a follow-up. Appreciate you, buddy. So just wanted to kind of roll through this a little bit, kind of sum up what we just learned, I guess. We learned a ton. There's so much. And the number one thing that I could point everybody to, and I wish that I could have, Jeff on for 2 or 3 hours, because it would just be an insane amount of information to be able to digest, and you guys would be getting information, from somebody else other than just me when you're listening to this channel, and someone that has a wealth of knowledge, more so than I. And I learn so much when I listen to people that are smarter than me, and I gotta be that big sponge in the room, just soak it all up. But simply just go through their scouting profiles at NFL Draft.sportsinfosolutions.com. There's so much good information in here. And then the one thing that, a lot of the regular fans, casual fans, whatever you want to call us, it's not really digging into some of these stats and looking at the trade-offs. I know that I do. I mean, I look at, that's just what I am. I'm an analytical, statistical nerd. This is what I love, numbers. So I look at all this stuff. And when I go through my mock drafts internally, the things that I don't share, and I go through all my player evaluations, the ones that I don't share, to get ready for the draft when I seem to have my best output as far as, getting the right players to the right teams, it's tends to be a lot of these numbers that, like what I'm looking at right now, that make the most sense. And this is what this company is all about. is getting the right information, the right data together, not just for you, but they have contracts with like every NFL team, that they're providing a lot of data to. And it's not just NFL, it's baseball, it's hockey, it's everything, it's every sport. Numbers matter, right? Film will always be the true test, the eye test, but numbers do matter to be able to follow the patterns and the progression of an athlete, and are they getting better? Like to Payton's, case here, if he would have come out in 2023, he probably would have had a much better opportunity at getting drafted at a much higher level. If this were the same draft class, he would been probably up top 10 of available edge rushers in this class, but he didn't, and he stayed back for a couple of seasons. And I'm not real sure what the reason was. I don't know if there was injuries or whatever, but man, he had a really good year that year. And then it just slowly tapered off to where, he had some big time struggles. But going back and, looking at some of the players that we talked about today and some things that I learned, like Gabe Jacas, I was less intrigued by him. Before I watched some of the other sets of film. I'm a little more intrigued, but I still think if you're looking for that ready-made guy to help your team win, and I think that's where the Lions are right now, is they need guys that can help their team win today. I don't think you're taking a Jacas at pick 50. I don't. I think that you're looking for a player that's going to help you right now. If he was still available at 118, or if the Lions moved up to pick 90, or even 85 or 80, then yeah, of course, like you're going to want to take a player like that. And I'm glad that he just said, unless you're looking at David Bailey, there's not a more perfect edge rusher in this class. And then after that, a lot of these players have some issues and or things to work on. And so I think that, a lot of our fan base is looking at this saying, oh my God, the edge class is so deep. It's false to a degree. It's deep with depth, right? Depth and projects. And as you heard, Mr. Dean multiple times, even talking about players like TJ Parker or, Keldric Faulk or Cashius Howell, a lot of project, right? There's a lot to work on with these players. They might have half of their or 40% of their ability as an edge rusher. But there's a lot of limitations with some of these players too, and where they belong, whether it's on the line, off the line, and situationally, are you only having them in on third down, or is it only first and second down? Are these run stuffers or are these pass rushers only, sub specialists? And you have a great mixture of them. But to have guys, like Zion Young like Malachi Lawrence that had a big boost this week, a lot of that's that tool set, right? I mean, he's a fifth-year senior. He's a little bit older, but he has all the requisites that you want from a pass rusher as far as, the height, the weight, the length. I mean, his hand size is pretty good. It's not elite, but it's pretty good. Speed is great. The burst, the vertical, and the broad jump. And the one thing that we didn't see a lot this year from most of the players is that 3-cone. I know that there's some people out there that value that 3-cone, and there's a reason why it's never been in or on my T-tap system, because that system can't look at the 3-cone and say that this player is better than that player. And then when you only have 3 players do the 3-cone this year, it's pretty hard to use that information across the whole lot of edge rushers, right? So that's why it's never been involved. I take the things that most athletes have put together or that most athletes will do, and that way I was able to develop the system that I have, and it's allowed me to be very accurate with a lot of these players. Now, not accurate from a scouting sense. It's a totally different system, right? But before I get too off track, a player like Malachi, like I was saying, his tackling's terrible. His gap integrity is terrible. Point of attack strength is maybe not the greatest, but he has high motor. He has a more developed pass rush bag of tools. and he has very quick hands. And you can utilize all that, right? As a coach, you can teach certain things, but there's some things you just can't teach. And so if you don't have that speed and the length and the agility and, and you're never probably going to get it, I can't teach you technique with it. And with a guy like Malachi Lawrence, he comes to the table with all of that, and then now you just need to teach him some technique. But to extrapolate all this out a little bit further, it's where are these players coming in to benefit your team day one? And how can you utilize what that player is bringing to the table day one? Year 2, day one is a little bit different. Like they Sports Info Solutions, how they evaluate these players is how do these players look the next year? After that year of growth and development, and then a little bit of a break in between the offseason to finish molding themselves. And that's where they see a lot of these players at, is the second season. So Malachi, look, he's probably still the most interesting prospect at pick 50. But it sounds like he's going to go up in the first round. Very, very doubtful that the Lions are going to have a shot at Malachi Lawrence if he ends up in the first round or even anywhere close to the top of the second round, unless the Lions do something significant with draft picks this year. Now, I've heard to get into the back end of the first round or get into the top of the second round, that pick 50 is probably going to take a 4th round pick. That's it. And the Lions have an extra 4th round pick. So the question is, are you willing to get rid of a 4th round pick at pick 50 to move all the way up? And the answer should be 100% yes across the board. And I think that the Lions need to do that. Matter of fact, they need to give up the 4th round pick, and you might as well throw a 7th round pick or 6th round pick in with it, because you really don't need it this year, and move up to get somebody. And I think that is how you end up with a Malachi Lawrence. That is how you end up with an edge rusher if the Lions do in fact go offensive line at pick 17. Now, the biggest question is, how many offensive linemen are going to go in the first round? And would the Lions entertain even taking an edge rusher in the first round at pick 17? And I think the answer is going to be a resounding no. Looking at this matrix and going through some of the things that we've gone through, Bailey, Reese, those guys got to be gone top 10, right? If you bring in a guy like Faulk, are you really going to take him at 17 and be a run stuffer? Parker? I mean, I don't see it. And I don't see it at 17. That's too premium of a pick to waste on a player that has so much development left in front of them. We need an impact player, right? That first round pick at pick 17 has to be an impact player. Now, if you view impact as, okay, our run defense wasn't very good last year, but it's been great the 3 years before that, could a guy like Keldric Faulk come in and stabilize our run game on downs 1 and 2, or is that Payton Turner, right? That's already with us. DJ Wanham, is he going to be that third down specialist going in, getting after the quarterback? Possibly. So is edge even a big concern? Probably not. And I think that's exactly why Brad brought in the players that he did, is they see the same thing that we just went through today, that after the first 3 or 4 guys, it's a giant nosedive in talent, and you have to have plenty of picks between pick 33 and pick 60 to be able to get some of these guys and be able to have a team that can allow these guys to grow and have a chance to flourish. But as a year 1 guy, it's probably not there. So it may be deep. It may be deep, but it's not going to be deep like you think it is with starters. And I think that is the one thing we just have to accept, and Lions fans have to accept that. And maybe we're all wrong. Maybe Jeff's wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe everyone else is wrong that's thinking that way. And the small percentage of people that are saying anything different are right. We won't know until the season starts, right? We won't know until the season starts.